What I love is the ability to talk to students about something that actually means an awful lot more to them than they're aware of. And that is why they are the way they are, how the world around them was created, and how they can develop as individuals and as part of a community based upon a series of principles and ideas that have a very, very long history and a very sophisticated development. And understanding that history and that development will help them understand who they are, help them understand the world around them, and help them face some of the problems that they as individuals will face, and we as a nation, and in fact as a people will face. And to do that, what I'm most interested in doing is trying to get them to see the world through the eyes of others. Students actually are not terribly good at looking at the world from the perspective of others. It's an age in life when you're developing who you are and you're very much focused on your own personal perspective and your own interests and your own desires, and there's the tyranny of the dinner table from family and so on. And what I like to do is to try and coax them out of that and to see through the eyes, through the prism of another time and another place, and to tell them that the modern concept of the individual with the idea of validated human agency and the creation of their own life is a consequence of decisions made in the past. And what I'm, again, trying to do is to get them to see that so many of the things that they think they've discovered actually has been prepared for them by others, and that they can see the world around them in a way that is more dynamic by interpreting their own desires, experiences, and knowledge in a broader context through knowledge of other literatures, other art forms, other people's histories and stories, other biographies, other economic systems, and all of those things that make us human. There are two sets of challenges. One has to do with the nature of the discipline itself. The kind of history I do requires them to take large amounts of information from several disciplines, from literature, art history, the traditional social, economic, political, intellectual history, and put them all together in order to create a kind of mosaic of the world of the past, and to see that world not from their own perspective, but from the perspective of people who actually lived then, so they could make appropriate judgments, so that they could ask themselves, if I should have awakened in 15th century Florence, how would I feel? What would I see? What would I smell? What would I hear? And this helps them not only realize that the past is a different country and a different place, but that the people who lived in the past had different kinds of experiences. But those experiences also help provide a platform in which they can build their own, and so that they know precisely what it is that they're trying to define within themselves and trying to give a vocabulary to their own experience. So that's what cultural history does, and that's a kind of challenge that a student would have from, say, a disciplinary or an intellectual point of view. The other is the kind of societal pressure about, you're going to be a cultural historian? I mean, what's that going to do for you? How are you going to get a job? I can understand being a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, though that's instrumental vocational training. But to be a cultural historian? Well, again, my answer is that any profession or any experience that requires you to deal with huge amounts of information, to be articulate, to see the world from other perspectives, to deal with people on a human level, and to understand the complexity of human experience, any of those sorts of professions, and we're actually talking about almost anything that anyone does, from being a taxi driver to being a social worker, these, in fact, are particularly useful skills. And don't think in terms of, I'm being trained for a job. Think in terms, I'm being trained for life, and I'm being trained for citizenship, and I'm being educated in order to fulfill everything I can be from my own desires and my own abilities. The opportunities, I think, are huge. As I said, any occupation that requires you to deal with large amounts of information and make a coherent analysis, to come up with a perspective that isn't purely a technical analysis of material that is clearly defined. Anything that requires the work of the imagination, anything that requires you to deal on a human level with human problems and human issues. These are the sorts of things. So think about them. Not only teaching, but law, social work, hospitality industry would be obvious. Almost any kind of responsibility that takes into account human motivation, human interest, and the ability to define and articulate those interests. Advertising, even retail. These would, in fact, be the natural place for our graduates to shine and, in fact, to grow and become leaders in that field.